Many countries in the region are increasingly alarmed at Russia's advances. Yesterday, Finland and Sweden brushed off warnings from Moscow that if they were to join NATO, there would be serious consequences. But today, Russia's foreign minister had this to say.
Finland and Sweden reaffirmed the principle that the security of some states should not be built at the expense of the security of other countries. It's obvious that the accession of Finland and Sweden to NATO, which is primarily a military organisation, would have serious military and political consequences that would require our country to take reciprocal steps.
Well, joining me now is Professor Alexander Stubb, the former Prime Minister of Finland. Very good to see you this afternoon. Thank you very much for your time. What do you make then of these threats from Russia? If Finland and Sweden join NATO, there will be serious repercussions.
Well, two observations on that. First is the short term. I don't think there is a direct threat to Finnish or Swedish security at the moment, and that's the assessment that we hear both from our political leadership and also our military. The second observation is that the person speaking there, I think, was a spokeswoman of the foreign ministry, Zakharova, and we have heard these words uttered before, both from Putin and from Lavrov. So in that sense, it's nothing new. But I can say, however, that whatever Putin is doing at the moment, the figures in favor of NATO membership, both in Finland and Sweden, are going up.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. What is the Finnish population's view on joining NATO?
Well, I can only give you a Swedish view based on data, because today there was an opinion poll published in Sweden where for the first time in Swedish history, there is more people in favor than against. It was 41% in favor, 35 against, and 25 undecided. And remember that Sweden has been much more skeptical about NATO membership than Finland. So I would expect, without being too rash on this, that the first opinion poll that comes out in Finland, if it comes out next week, we're going to see for the first time in Finnish history a clear majority in favor of NATO membership. So in that sense, whatever strategy Putin had, it has gone horribly wrong for him.
Well, that's right, isn't it? Because, of course, Finland famously militarily neutral since the Cold War, but Russia is right on your doorstep.
Yeah, sorry, I have to. I think this is an international fallacy. Finland is not a neutral state. And I say to everyone and every international media, Finland has not been neutral since the Cold War. We do not belong to a military alliance, but we're full members of the European Union, including the Solidarity Clause 42.7. We are in very close partnership with NATO. Our military is completely NATO compatible, actually more NATO compatible than many of the NATO member states. In the early 1990s, we bought over 60 F-18s. Now we've just purchased 64 F-35s. The United Kingdom brought us into a so-called JEF coalition inside NATO. So the only thing that we do not have is Article 5, but the rest of it, Finland is not neutral. We chose our football team in 1995, and that is the West, it is the European Union, and it is NATO.
OK. One thing we do know is that Finland and Sweden are getting enhanced access to NATO intelligence over Ukraine and the situation there at the moment. Is that something you welcome?
Yes, definitely. And that was a decision that was taken yesterday in the NATO summit in the so-called 30+2 format, and the two meant Finland and Sweden. So now there's this exchange of intelligence. And, I think that NATO, the United Kingdom, the United States, and many other NATO states fully understand that for security up in the northeastern corner of Europe, Finland and Sweden are crucial. And therefore, I think any exchange of information is important. Just to give you the figures, Finland has 1,340 kilometers of border with Russia. Ukraine has roughly 2,000 kilometers of border with Russia. And the distance from Finland or from Helsinki to Kiev is roughly 1,500 kilometers. That's 300 less than the distance that we have from Helsinki to Brussels. So that just gives you the strategic implications of why Finland is such a key part here. And this is what really amazes me with Putin's strategy. He has united the West. he has rejuvenated NATO. He has given NATO a new sense of purpose. He is in the process of isolating his country totally and fully. He is in the process of Europeanizing Ukraine. So from his perspective, short term might look good, but long term looks, I think, quite grim.
What's Finland doing to help the Ukrainian people?
The Finnish government has today taken a decision on a package to NATO, which is both financial, it also includes material. From what I understand, and again, I don't have the information anymore as I used to, but it's tents and the like. As far as I can understand, there's no military equipment yet, but I would urge, I think, all of Europe to do, in Draghi's words, whatever it takes to help Ukraine at this particular moment. That's why I think the sanctions are a very good part. SWIFT will happen. There's no question about it. What I do think is that we're entering an era of total isolation of Russia, and then change of the regime has to come from inside. So, you know, some people might say this could potentially be the beginning of the end for President Putin and his regime.
You really believe that? It could be the beginning of the end?
I think it could be. The problem here is that we do not know the timeline. Russians have a capacity to tolerate discomfort and uncomfort a little bit better than we do in the West. But and Russia does have great currency reserves. It has a fairly stable economy. But for how long it can sustain that? And I think that one of the key things that people have to look at here, there are 190,000 Russian troops right now on the move around Ukraine. And those 190 troops, most of the men fighting are young. They haven't really experienced the Soviet Union, and even their mothers haven't experienced the bigger part of Soviet Unions. So for them to go and see this sacrifice in basically a completely unnecessary war and aggression toward what I would call a brother and sisterhood nation, Ukraine, it has to have some ramifications regardless of the economic situation. So I do think that in the long run, Putin made a colossal strategic mistake. And I think Russia is going to be completely isolated. And I'm really saddened for the Russian people, not for the regime.
Yeah, we shall see how things pan out. It's a desperate situation. Former Prime Minister of Finland, Professor Alexander Stubb, many thanks.
Thanks.
You're watching Sky News. Coming up, we'll have all the latest for you on those protests against the conflict taking place in London today.